Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Mr. Michael DeVaul. But before we get into the conversation today, and for those who are here for the first time, and for those who are here more than once, I'm still going to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Richard A. Cross, and I'm the founder of the Black Male Impact. And we're going to have a conversation today that I believe every one of us will benefit from. So if you're here with us today, please share this conversation with your network. Again, please share this conversation with your network. Again, this is the Black Male Impact, and it is where positive changes are inspired. So, we're going to have a conversation today about defied conventional expectations. And the guest today, as I said earlier, Mr. Michael DeVaul. Mr. DeVaul have served 40 years at the YMCA, and that is commitment. That is really giving back to our community. He's also the National Executive Director of Boys and Young Men of Color. He's an ambassador for youth development and community strengthening. Mr. DeVaul, welcome to the Black Male Impact. And before we get into the conversation, please share more about yourself.
I will. I will. First of all, Dr. Richard Cross, but I won't call you Richard. But
Yeah, man, that's fine.
you're a doctor, right? I'm an MD, brother. Michael
Oh,
DeVaul is. I tell people I'm an MD.
okay, that's right. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
so I'm in a way I'm a doctor too, right? But it's what first of all it's great to be here, and I'm especially grateful because you've had Devin Anglin on, our
Yes, sir.
national coordinator. So I think um, both of us having the opportunity to engage is pretty incredible. I am I've worked in a while, actually 43 years. I come from and hail from a town called Evanston, Illinois. Some may not know this, but it's the first suburb north of Chicago, and then the first country in the or first city in the country to do reparations.
Wow.
So if you look back and you look up Evanston, Illinois, there are lots of things that you'll learn about that great town. But one of the things that you'll learn is it was one of the first cities in the country to do reparations. So I'm grateful to be here. Again, as a older man, I've got a beautiful wife, two young boys who are not really young. They're 20, almost 29 and 32. And
Wow.
so I'm also graced because I've not only lived the experience for myself, but I've shared this by raising two incredible young men doing incredible things. So, real quick, my story. I'm from Evanston, Illinois, born to Inez and Manville DeVaul Jr. So we had or senior. We had a brother. My younger brother was named after my father,
Okay.
and I'm grateful to be here for a number of reasons. One is my own lived experience. I think people, just to be clear, I'm 63. And so I, in my first grade year, was when schools got integrated in Evanston. So I've been through integration.
Yeah.
And I tell people that that is a really important inflection moment for me. And it's one where I learned how to navigate, to a sense, other people, particularly white people, how I could navigate with and not against. But I came through the YMCA there. And when I was younger, there used to be black Ys and white Ys. So I came out of what we called the Emerson Street Y, which was for blacks only
Okay.
until 1968. That was when the Ys merged. And the reason I tell people that is because it's such an inflection point. Historically, we have black Ys, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But it's important that because I experienced black Ys, which in a sense back then we were only for boys. So not only did I experience black people, black Ys, but in those days, college students used to live inside black Ys because they couldn't live on campus.
Okay.
Northwestern University is in Evanston. So I
Okay.
had an opportunity to also, come across college students. So as a young man, came in, as I think I said to you, my most formative experience was at age 11 when I said F you to my sixth grade teacher. And she said, "You going home for a couple of weeks. And when you go home, look at all those words that you know how to use other than F you." And that saved my life.
Wow.
It was a lifesaver because I learned, right? It was that was the difference later on. I learned the power between system one and system two,
Yeah.
reaction and response time. And so
Yeah.
I learned in middle school the importance of response time. So fast forward, I've worked for the Y for 43 years. I actually worked in that local Y after college. Went away to Columbia College and then uh, came back to town to work for my local Y, and then started in Charlotte in 1999 and worked my way up to chief social responsibility professionally. And then 5 years ago, I took on this role as the national director for Boys and Young Men of Color. So I'm so grateful to be here because this is right. I'm here because I've had the lived experience. It's
Yes.
important for me to share that experience. And I'll tell you one lesson I learned: access and opportunity equals exceeding expectations. So if you get access and you give our boys the opportunity, they will exceed their own expectations. And so it's so important. Those three little simple, right? It's kind of like access plus opportunity leads to a greater than exceeding expectations. It's a formula that I used as a young youth leader because that's
Yeah.
where I started in the youth, working with pretty middle school and high school teens. And then I'm really a national youth leader today. So, I mean, all I really am is a national youth development director.
Man, and that's I just listening to your experience in the Y, especially even before the YMCA become one YMCA. I can just imagine what the experience was like. But also, as you said, when the YMCA started, especially the Black Y, it was just serving black students, black males in particularly. And I also like, as you said, for our black boys and boys of color, once they get access, and plus opportunity, they will exceed the expectation. I do agree with that because sometimes, you find some young men who haven't done well in a particular area, but once they get into an environment that provide the opportunity, that leads them to, do exceptionally well. I was going to, ask you my first question to share about your story, and but you kind of touch on, your story and how that impact your life. But if I should ask, whilst you're in the process or in the earlier stages of, working at the YMCA, did you have the desire to break away from traditional path? Did you, want to see greater change, whilst you were there, especially in the initial stages, or you was just going with what was presented to you?
Well, I would say early on, I still do trainings called BYOB, bring in your own brand. And what I say to people is, I never believed that I was just going to be a Y leader. I have a brand that I was bringing to the organization, and
Okay.
I would try to disrupt in the most positive ways how you serve in a different way. So I use a tagline a lot. You have to equip the skill to build the will. And equipping skill is not just for the adult leader; it's also for the student. Right? It's not enough to have will. You have to learn how to equip it. So I would say, particularly in the last 15, Richard, almost 20 years, I
Yes.
have I have never been in a role where the role was already there or defined.
Oh, wow.
So I in the last 20 years of my career, really 15 years of my career, I've always been in the roles that where I had a chance to create the role. And I hats off to a guy named Andy Calhoun, the CEO of the Charlotte Y, because I came here as an executive director. And he one day he took me to an Atlanta. I was at a conference. He said, "I don't want you to leave.
Oh,
What
wow.
would it take to keep you here?" And I said, "Well, Andy, if you create a job working directly for you and you give me an opportunity to work on what I see, I'll stick around." And he
Correct.
created at the time it was called Senior Vice President of Organizational Advancement, then went to Chief Community Impact Officer, and then Chief Social Responsibility Officer. And that's really what led me to Boys and Young Men of Color. What I saw, Richard, and I think what I see in my entire career for some reason, I the Lord has gifted me with the ability to see connections, and what I always try to do is act on the gap of a connection. And so for me in this particular role, but I think even starting out in my role 43 years ago. There's something where I could see that something was missing. I call the term now like a genetic rescue.
Yeah.
So let's think about this for a second. Basically, boys are in peril. We now know it really doesn't matter what data source you're looking at, and white
Yeah.
boys are in peril too. So it's
Yeah.
not just black boys and brown boys, particularly in the age groups of 11 to 17, which is where we work. So our goal is to get to 100 cities, 10,000 boys by 2026, right? But we index on universal metrics. And my point to people is when you look at what's happening in schools or any other system, generally what you're going to find in the current state is boys and men are missing. We're missing as teachers in schools. We have the highest chronic absenteeism rate. When you look at crime rates, particularly if you disaggregate once and you go to property crime, we're usually the ones causing crime, right? Boys. Um, if you go into business and industry, what you start to see is that women are excelling, especially our black women. But what we see is men are decreasing, right? In income, median household income, in roles. And part of that is it's almost like we've taken something out of the system, right? So environmentalists call it a genetic rescue. So to your point around the black male impact is if you were in a pond and the fish were turned sideways and they were starting to die, right? What
Mm.
the ecologists know is to look in the ecosystem and find out what's missing. What's missing? And they slowly reintroduce it. And I would say there's a skill of cultural responsiveness that we don't have. Our boys need an environment where we understand and can index on culture and identity development. And so if I saw young Richard and he was causing commotion, I would say, "Hey man, come talk to me. What's going on?" No, no, no. I'm gonna kick his ass. You know, he's no, no, no. Hold on a minute. What happened? And he would tell me, and I would say, "Okay, well, that's one way to do it, but another way might be here's something else that I see in your skill that you can actually develop." And it's kind of an important thing to identify what that is for our young boys and our males, and then that is to me like a genetic rescue. There's a skill missing, which is
Correct.
why I say passion and accountability, because they give you the tools to hear and to heal. You
Correct.
can't heal if you're not hearing.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
You can't
We
hear.
and as Dr. Thomas remind us this a quote that he posts this morning, that we have to be intentional with our listening. So we have to, be there, present, listening to whoever we're talking to, so we can actually hear, and once we are hearing, then we can make the right, or provide the right response to what's happening presently, because we're actually listening. But you have said, man, you have said so many important things, especially when it comes to us as black men or boys, that things need to change or something needs to be put in place for us to reach the young men, because I guess we're not reaching them, because as you stated, we are not graduating as high as everybody else. We are not in the professions that can make a difference as everybody else. We're not excelling even as much as the black woman, and we have seen that, and that seems to be something that's ongoing. I don't want to stick too long on these points that you have made, but it is something that we must look at, as you talk about the generic rescue, that we have to find a way to reach the young men. And as you talk about culture and identity development, which I believe is important, because the sense of self seems to be disappearing, and if they don't develop that sense of self, they're going to be easily distracted and easily fall prey to the distractions that will pull them away from what they're capable of doing. But hopefully, we get to talk more about that as we go. But we know we may not, and I just want to say this early, we may not get to all the things that we want to talk about today. So, but that will give us an opportunity to talk again in the near future. But my next question to you is, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when stepping outside of societal expectations?
Well, I mean, I think we have to learn how to rewrite the narrative That is probably the biggest obstacle we get. How do you move beyond the margins? Let me be really clear and challenge my own organization, who I love. 43 years I've been here. We can't prioritize reach anymore, our ability just to get to reach. We
Yeah.
have to prioritize impact, right? So you know, I work in a big, giant organization, and everybody knows us because of our reach.
Yeah.
We have lots of locations. We're all over the country. In fact, we're all over the world. We're in 120 countries. There's 26 YMCA's in Africa.
Wow.
So if you look, there is the most people don't realize this, right? We are in 120 countries. Our current World Alliance leader, so we have a international headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, is from Togo.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
He's the first African ever, a guy named Carlos Sanvi. So the obstacles I've seen is when someone says you can't do it, right? No. What? And then trying to get them to see. So here's the juxtaposition. If you tell me in every city you have a double-digit increase in crime, if you disaggregate that crime once, it's going to be mostly property crime. If you disaggregate for the demographic, it's going to be mostly boys, particularly of color, 13 to 18. And then if you go to the school, it's going to be 75% chronic absenteeism. So in my mind, I see the data point. And what I know is them brothers are hustling. They stealing your stuff and they making money. Okay.
Right.
They smart enough to do it, but these boys will do one or two things when they get older, either make or take taxes. And that's how I tell people where I've tried to push through is it's in my own resilience and my own lived and shared experiences that I know no, you're not trying to help me. And
Yeah.
you're not trying to help us. And so what I've learned is we got to push through the resilience and the visibility. We've got to get through the margins and we've got to learn how to respond and not react. Right. And then we've got to get to the point of living truth over the limiting labels. And so what the obstacles that I face is when the system tells me something can't be done, and then I just set out to do it. And I will say, particularly in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I would say nationally, because I'm powered too by we have African American CEOs. There's 50 of them in the network, and they were one of the significant pieces of the organization 5 years who seeded this opportunity. But what I learned is if I see the problem, it is so important for me to own what I see and try as best I can to engage people in it and then find my allies sometimes who won't look like me, but to be prepared. So I'm a faith driven man that you're going to have Judases at the table.
Correct.
And some of those Judases look like you and me,
Better believe it.
right? And you got to love on them anyway, right? So it's love that transcends even the Judases, right? And you just can't have two of them
Correct.
because Jesus only had one.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
who am I to have two if he only had one? But if
That's
you
right.
are Judas at my table, I appreciate you too. So part of what it is I've learned to slow it down and to get people to understand. And then when I get disrupted, what I would do is then get more people involved and let it not be about me, the
Correct.
person. But I think the phrase is, you got to be hard on systems, soft on people,
Yeah.
right? Or kind on people. And so it's kind of when people don't agree with me, I say, okay, well, I'm not looking to be right, right? It's
Correct.
when my boys were younger. Um, People will tell you there's two tricks I have. One, if you are causing commotion in a room, I usually take off my glasses because that's a trick for me to stay in response mode
Okay.
because I can't see the people clearly, and I can
Oh,
hear better. I can hear better. So that's a trick. When I get into trouble, I typically would take off my glasses. The other is I learned how to ask a really good question. So what you're telling me is you see this problem, but you don't think, well, no, I see the problem, but no. Hear me out. You see the problem, and I'm thinking I'm giving you part of what could be a solution. And what you're telling me is you don't want to do it. And then they say, well, no, I didn't say that. Well, I'm telling you that's what I heard.
yeah.
And I think what we have to learn is, particularly as black men and brown men, and in a current state,
Yeah.
right? Well, we're not present at a lot of tables. We have to be mindful that people can't, until I can teach responsiveness, how to be culturally responsive. I, I got to give it before I can get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's almost like the young man. Like when he says, when he is frustrated with me, I have to try to get into the loving mode of compassion and then wait on it and hold them accountable. As my boys, I used to say this to my boys all the time. They will always be smarter than me, which is true,
Yeah.
but they will never be wiser. There's a difference between the two. So don't try to outsmart me. I'm not going to try to outwise you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, or don't outsmart me, and you should not try to outwise me. Right. I won't outsmart you. And I think it's really using words to get people to see something that they can't see, and staying in a responsive, more inquiry mode to get people to listen to themselves in the moment of tension. And that's to me how I've been able to push through because I know the narrative. And so
Yeah.
my job is to rewrite it to a certain extent, but not to rewrite it with force,
Yeah.
but rewrite it with influence.
Man, that is, wise words, I would say. I can hear the wisdom, as you said, you have gone through and you have had the experience. I can definitely hear the wisdom in what you're sharing, from you telling us that it's important that we prioritize impact and also understand the young people that we are talking to, are talking with, having that compassion. Also, you have shared something that I believe is important to remember as we continue on this journey, and that to be culturally responsive, understand what's going on, where we are, how we can impact that immediate situation. But also, which I like, you approach it with a problem solving mindset, because not all of us, we can identify the problem, but we can't solve it because a lot of people can see what's going on, but they can't connect the dots to fill that gap with what's going on. And I
Yeah, I'll
think,
tell you, let me interject a quick point before
yeah,
I forget. There was a woman in my hometown, actually a white Jewish woman. Her name was Alice Creeman. And then I had a group. My father was a VFW member, um, 7186. But one of the conversations I had with Alice Creeman, I was a young program director, and she was the one that helped me really think about problem solving. Right, and so I said, what I said to her that I still remember today is, Miss Creeman, programs are interventions that solve problems.
yeah,
Right. In a way, you're supposed to put the program should be out of business if you solve the problem. And so the mindset is to reverse the narrative, right? Is no, if that program was working, we would be solving problems. If it's not working, we're not solving problems. We're just indexing on reach, output, and money. We're not inputting on reducing something that is bad and increasing something that is good. Okay. That is, in a sense, what a program is.
correct, correct. You
Yeah,
know,
it's
man,
like medicine. It's like medicine, right? It's
oh
the
yeah,
inoculation. Yeah.
it is. And as you share that point, I've been looking at all the programs that we have developed across the country. And I was just talking to someone recently, about Chicago and some of the challenges there. And I've seen plenty of programs started. But as you said, the reach is happening, but the impact is not really taking place because, as you said, the program should solve problem, should decrease it. It should not even maintain. Once the programs are in, there should be a significant change or evidence of the work. That's what I believe. When it comes to um, solving problems or creating programs. But I think the person's leading it is important because the person also, I believe, have to have that awareness of self, knowing what their strengths can be in that space to create the impact that is needed. Because because I think I read something some years ago that there was a young man. He created a program. He was doing so well in the community at one, maybe the school. I don't remember exactly, and they replaced the young man. They said, "Oh, we're going to use what you have been doing, all the lessons, all the thing that you came up with, and we're going to give it to someone else to run the program." They put someone in, nothing happened. All the progress that they have been seeing, nothing happened because it wasn't just the information from it was the person themselves that was really making the impact happen. So it's not just the information. So just listening to you, bring that story back to mind, where it's not just having the information, it's you as the individual understanding the environment in which you are and understanding yourself and how you can make that impact, to create the change that you want to see.
Yeah, yeah, Richard. Let me reflect on that. Um, so here's the one thing that is so important, and especially in my own organization. So let me just put a data point out there. The Y over the years has become 73% full time women.
Wow.
So if you go coast to coast, right, we
So,
are of our full time staff, coast to coast, we got 2,600 Ys across the country, right? Locations. Um, think about it. We're 73% women. So I think it's not women that is the issue, right? It's we need more men because the lived and shared experience, the one thing that I have that no one can take from me is my lived and shared experience. You,
so
I know what it's like, and
the
I'm
men
very
the men are
yeah.
not
Go ahead.
applying. The men are not applying.
Well, I think we're going through what I hope is another renaissance moment, right? But basically, what you see in the nonprofit industry, you see in the education industry,
Yeah,
right? In that sector, we got a problem recruiting and retaining males of color to do the work. In the
correct.
nonprofit sector, it's the same thing, and it's not an indictment on women.
Yeah,
It's an indictment on the culture.
correct. Culture.
And the
That
question is, what culture are we creating that someone like myself can't come in and stay in an organization 43 years? So part of what I know is that's why I say you need a genetic rescue. You got to figure it out. It's you can do two things at once, right? It's not a zero sum game.
yeah,
Is to increase men doesn't mean decreasing women,
correct.
right?
Or
What
vice
it
versa.
means is yeah, or vice versa, right? It's I don't need to decrease women in a workplace. I need to increase men.
Correct.
And so I don't know if it's what the percentages should be, but 2773 is not it.
So what's the percentage of students the YMCA serve between male
Oh
and
my God,
female?
yeah, I don't know. It's millions. In our own platform, we're just getting at around, we're in 70 cities, so we're just around 7,000 boys. And, we're learning a little bit about them, their shared voice, how to do it. But we're also trying to figure out a way, frankly, to even work with our HBCUs to recruit more males of color into the organization because these are the institutions. So let me go back to the history for a second. Anthony Bowen, who was the founder in 1853 of the first colored Y or black Y in 1853, we have to remember he was a patent secretary working for the U.S. government, right? When in a great job, right? Because back then, right, he bought himself out of slavery, born into Maryland. His father was a friend of John Brown, the abolitionist, and
Hmm.
so he was actually developing the Y in his basement and putting slaves in his attic.
Wow.
Okay, so part of what we know is what gives me fuel is that origin story.
Correct.
If to know that Booker T. Washington was involved in the Y2, people don't realize there were 24 black Ys built between 1910 and 1930 that were seeded by Booker T. Washington and a guy named Julius Rosenwald, who owned Sears, Jewish philanthropist.
Hmm.
Um, because they wanted to build leaders, they weren't worried about buildings. They needed the institutional leadership. So part of what we got to rewire is the brave and safe spaces is where we cultivate leadership, but where we also cultivate understanding. And so historically in my own organization, what I say to people is once I know my history, you can't take that from me.
Yeah.
You can't take from me that I know Booker T. Washington was in my organization. You can't take it from me that in 1853 Anthony Bowen created the first Black Y. You can't take from me that Mordecai Johnson, who was the longest standing president of Howard University, okay, worked at the Y 3 years before he took over Howard. Benjamin E. Mays, who is the longest standing president at Morehouse,
Hmm.
worked at the Y 3 years before he took over Morehouse. And so what I know is the institution of leadership, not just serving and not just programs, is paramount in my organization. I'm also an Omega man, so
Hmm.
I'm an Omega member of Omega Psi Phi. Benjamin Mays was too. But if you look at the history, there's a guy named Leonard Morris, and I'm giving you all this because this is the shared voice. Leonard Morris is a founder of Phi Beta Sigma, the fraternity, but
Hmm.
he also ran the first student Y on Howard's campus for black men.
Wow.
So you think like, no, no. Once I know those kinds of stories, you can't take those stories from me.
You
And that's
know,
what gives you the fuel to stay with it and to defy the conventional expectations. Is I already know people have paved the way before me, and
correct.
all I have to do is stay on the path, right? So I always say to people, I'm just putting the train back on the tracks. I'm gonna innovate and renovate the train because the rail line may be the same, but the train ain't gonna be the same. Boys ain't coming into this old train, so
Correct.
I gotta put some Bluetooth in there. I gotta put, there's just things I gotta innovate with, but
Correct.
the journey is pretty clear historically in our organization.
It is, and and again, just listening to your reflection on how men used to be, especially those who have started the journey, creating the space before today. I think hearing those reflection is important for us today, because sometimes we have disconnected ourselves from the leaders who have paved the way, and that can be a detriment to where we are going or what we want to do as individuals, because if we disconnect ourselves from the forefathers, those who have paved the way, those who have, take what they got and create something meaningful, and then we squander, what they have created, will only put us at a disadvantage. But as you're talking about the 73% women in the organization, that's where, yeah, we do need men to. Sometimes I wonder if we do need men to step up. Or there is, as you stated, what culture are we creating? Are we creating a culture where women take the lead? But that also causes conflict because again, the young men now seeing that, oh man, I'm not welcome here, because maybe that's what they're thinking. When they don't see men there, they maybe say, you know what, this place is not for me, so I'm not even going to apply. I was teaching a social problem class, and I one of the subtopic was overburdened women and displaced men. The women are getting some of the jobs that men used to get, and the men are not getting the jobs that they're used to. And maybe men, haven't been diversifying where they see different opportunities, different places. But that point really stick out to me, with that 73% of women in the organization. But we have to ask the question, what culture are we creating? I really appreciate that point, and that is something that I myself would be thinking about, as I go forward, especially with the black male impact and how we have to make ourselves available for the opportunities that are out there, because the opportunities can be there, but if we're not making ourselves available, we may not get those
Yeah, Richard,
opportunities.
let me follow up on that real quick. I
Yeah.
think I think the challenge and the opportunity is this, right? The call to action to brothers listening um, is we have to learn how to stand up too.
Yeah.
So you said this, right? But I'm just doubling up on something you said. I think what I want brothers to understand when they see me is you too belong in the space of creating culture. So to my organization, right? To give my organization the credit due, I'm here. I've
Yeah.
been in this role for 5 years.
Yeah.
So this is not a damnation on women.
Correct. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
This is my opportunity to tell men to step up. Now,
Correct.
I also have to play a role in creating an environment, right, where they can see the ability. And because I'm not a perfect person either. But I
Correct.
think what I would say to people is Andrew Young said something. I had the greatest thing about this job is having the ability to be in Sankofa moments often, right? You imagine I was in a room with a panel of Ambassador Young, who's 93, his brother, Walter Young, who's 90, a
Wow.
man named Norm Urquhart, who's 93, worked for the Y for 40 years, and another guy named Norm Joyner, who worked for the Y for 45 years. He's 80.
Wow.
Here's one thing that, I mean, Andrew Young said a bunch of things, But let me tell you the one thing, and they all did. It was incredible. I was in a room full of black men. Um, One of the things he said is that essentially you have a lot of social capital between your shoulders, and using that social capital between your shoulders is actually what gives us the breakthrough. And what I was hearing is something my parents used to say to me early on. You are not fully liberated until all of your friends are liberated. So I used to bring my black friends, my white friends to places, and my mom would be like my father, right? My mom used to go to PTA conferences for other kids' families because she felt like those parents may not have had the navigation skills that she had. Well, that taught me something, right? And
Yeah.
what I know is none of us are liberated until all of us are liberated.
Correct.
And so what we've got to do is use our purpose, use our brand to liberate others, right? And I'm not fully liberated. And as a guy who's been in the organization 43 years, I don't know that I have anything to prove.
Right.
So all I have is to serve, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
I've been in the organization 43 years. So I don't wake up having to prove anything. I've been here 43 years. I think what I really want is young people to believe
Yeah.
that when Anthony Bowen created the organization, he was thinking about black boys.
Yeah.
When we had Native American wives, they were thinking about Native Americans. When we had Chinese wives, they were thinking about Chinese. And
Hmm.
so we have to be mindful, even in the context of our white boys, because again, think about how we were created. We were created because boys were wreaking havoc in the world. Because we
Yeah.
came out of London, 1844. We came. Boston is the first United States Y, and then 1853 is the first black Y. So you think about, we were all over the country. We're in 120 countries. The origin story was solving the problem for boys so that we could get to be men. That's the whole origin story of the organization. So who am I to change the origin story?
Correct.
Yeah, my job is to keep talking about it, keep pushing it, keep focusing on it, be the resilience, liberate others, stand on purpose, look for collective power. Because I think the one thing we know today in this wonderful United States of America is, I believe, so this is my own bias, we are losing the sense of collective power as black and brown people. We need to
Oh
do
yeah.
that with white people. So the mobilization is everybody. But we've if I could wave a magic wand and put some pixie dust on one word, it'd be mobilization, right?
Yeah.
And I would use the J. Cole has a phrase: "You can dream, but don't neglect the execution." Right? It's in one
Man.
of his.
That is powerful right there. Because we have a lot of people dreaming but not executing. But man, you have said so many powerful reminders just now and how we should approach as we go forward. And I was just listening to you sharing and how what conclusion I will come to is this is the consciousness that you have developed. And in all honesty, and it's not just you, but your voice really needs to be heard more often. Because as you said, it's the lived experience that will help to liberate us, and because it's to become aware of how important it is to come together. Because you're not just sharing knowledge, you're sharing experience, and we that's coming behind you need to hear it. So that's what I concluded as you were talking is that higher consciousness that we really need to develop and have that willingness to learn, from those who are imparting the knowledge, to us, so we can create the change. But I do support you, as you said, man. We have, really lose out on this collective power, because we're not going to create a change, or we're not going to get a response from a policy standpoint without collective power. And it's not about being loud, it's about having that vision of working together, knowing why we are doing this, why we want the change, why we want to see impact, why we want to have a more positive representation of our community. It's important, but it's to get us as a collective, to develop that consciousness and realize how important it is. Because we can ask for what we want until we blue, but if we're not asking as a collective, it's going to be harder for it to happen how we would want it. Because I do believe that we have so much that we can give to our communities, to the world, but sometimes we may not have access and the opportunity to do so. But hope things change. But I'm going to go on to the next question because I know I have a whole lot of questions here. I know I'm not going to get through those questions to the rate at which we're going. But the question that I want to ask you right now is: was there a pivotal moment when you realized you had to forge your own path? What was that expectation experience like? When you had to forge your own path, what was that experience like?
If I were to go back, honestly, it was probably when I was in high school.
Wow.
So when I was in high school, okay, so be mindful, right? I told you the story of merging Ys, and I got on and got a job working in what back then the Y used to have what they call youth lobbies, where there were billiard tables and ping pong tables, and kids would come. And one of the things I learned, a man named, well, I'm not going to name him his name, but he was the ED of that particular Y, and I had white friends with me, and he brought us into his office. Now, mind you, I'm like 14, and he
Yeah.
says, "Okay, Mr. DeVaul, you're going to actually index on most of the black kids, and your two friends, a guy named Simon Carey and Dave Mendel, they're going to index on the white kids, right? They were white boys, so white men, young men." And I remember us all leaving that office going, "No, we're talking to all kids. I mean, he ain't gonna pigeonhole me into just talking to black kids, right? And he can't pigeonhole you into talking to white kids. No, I mobilized with them when we came out of the office at 14. It was probably that and my eighth grade experience. Um, when I said "f you" to the teacher, those were probably two really transformable experiences. And then my high school was wonderfully eclectic. I mean, I can tell you my identity was for sure started with my parents, but where iron sharpens iron, where I got at my very best was in high school. And what I learned in high school is in those pivotal moments, and that's where I learned, like, when someone says to me something, and I had a couple of running with police officers, because they would challenge me, and I would be with an eclectic group, and I felt like they would just zero in on me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And fortunately, I was with an eclectic group, but I would challenge police officers, around, "You just targeted me, right?" And then they would lock me up, whatever, right? And I went to, but I would say as I got older, the most pivotal moment was when I was went in to get my TSA pre-check. So I got arrested a couple of times when I was young, right? And I'm just for the context of the audience, I was born in the state of Illinois. So back then, raised the age, they were one of the very first states to essentially your record doesn't count until you're older than 18.
Okay.
Um, I got the TSA, man, I was like 47 or something, 48. And the guy asked me, "Have you ever been arrested?" I said, "No." And then he asked me again. Okay, now my black man was rearing up, right? My black Hulk. I'm
Yeah.
like, "This dude asked you this question two times." He said, "I want you to just pause, breathe for a minute, think about it." And I said, "Well, technically, yes." And I told him, he said, "Oh, I can see that." Now, Richard, I have been to the White House many, many times.
Yeah.
And I only say that to people because no one's ever asked me that question.
Wow.
And when I got to the TSA pre check, I realized, even at 47, that I had to invoke the skills that I learned in high school. That, okay, when they ask me the wrong questions and I feel like, my senses are tingling, don't let them hijack your amygdala,
Yeah.
right? That little P-shaped organ in the back, right? No, no, no. This ain't gonna be no amygdala hijack. I'm gonna pause for a minute and answer this dude's question, and
Yeah.
and that's a skill we need to learn when we're young, and then it's a skill we need to play out when we're older. So I'm going to imagine you, and I would say to other people, that pivotal moment in my early career helps me when I'm at the table in my current state. Right, is when people are saying things that are out of whack, right? And I'm at a table making decisions with other corporate leaders. I can channel that skill that I was developed in high school, which is why it's so important when I say about compassion and accountability and going down to the sixth grade level, is that skill is a life skill. Because all of the kids that I serve always tell me, like, you saved me. I didn't save you, you saved yourself. Let me tell you what I did do. I threw you a life preserver and I held on to the rope. And
Yeah.
I told you to get back in and I'll meet you downriver. There are going to be some rapids, as I used to tell my boys, but I got the rope. You're not going to drown. Tug on it if you need to come to the side and you need to look at your father in his eyes and think you're going to be okay. But you got to get back in because life is about going through the rapids. So the transformational experience in high school, which anybody who knows Everson High School, we only have one high school. Back then it was like 4,000, 5,000 students. So I just learned how to navigate, through the rapids and with other people.
Man, that is so important. And as you talk about the skills that we need to develop early, that we can better navigate ourselves, our lives later as an adult. Was it your father who instilled those skills? I know you said you have different experiences, from eighth grade and from you got to the Y and you realized that you need to do some things. But was it your father who instilled, those characteristics, those skills in you that you practice, that that, what, I need to take the initiative and bring us together at age 14, which you work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me say quickly. I am very lucky to have had both parents intact, throughout my entire life. And my father taught me the skill of resilience. My father was a corporal in the army, so I have to say, like, he did really believe in a little bit of corporal punishment,
Yeah.
But I would say what I learned is also by watching him and watching how he treated my mother.
Okay.
And to me, what he was able to do, which was different, like he taught me how to be a man. I think my mother taught me how to be a gentleman. And I look at those experiences, and even when I talk to my boys, right, I tried my best because I didn't have a lot of drama or trauma in my own home. And I tried to make sure I didn't bring drama and trauma to my home. Right. And I protected my boys from drama and trauma. In fact, my boys and I just talked about this because they would say they didn't have a lot of drama and trauma. And I'm not sure I'm going to say they didn't. But what I'm
Yeah.
going to say is my father used to have long conversations with me. He taught me how to do things with boys. You have to be riding with us in a car, eating a meal, playing ball, moving, right? We're not going to talk to you if you just sit us down like girls. No, no. He taught me the skill of, hey, let's get in the car and ride.
Correct.
And then he asked me all the questions while we were riding. And he done got all the contextual clues, and I didn't even know it. He done put all the puzzle pieces together. He said, hey, my young man, are you having sex? I was like, how you know? He said, I put the puzzle pieces together, because you've been telling me over the last 2 weeks, but I didn't want to tell you at question one and question two, but I'm at question five and I can tell. And I
Wow.
thought, hey, man, they're so smart. And I used that skill, as my sons would say, they didn't like it, but I used that skill as a father. That was a skill I learned from my father and a skill I hopefully have translated to my sons.
Yeah, I think those conversations are important. Not all males do have the opportunity, to have that experience. But I think that's where the why comes in because you then get to, pass on those skills and the knowledge to the young people that you serve who may not have that experience in their own home, which I believe is important. And I'm just going to
Yeah,
go
let
to
me give you one example. My father introduced me to everybody in his VFW. Right, he was a veteran and foreign wars member. So anytime I did anything, okay, this was before cell phones.
yeah,
When I got suspended from school, 20 men knew. And
wow,
so when I would go around the community, they'd be like, "Come here, young man. What happened at school?" I'm like, "How you know that already?"
yeah,
Because my father used the phone, right, the landline, right. He'd call everybody, and I'd run into Bo Price, or I'd run into Mr. Wallace, or it wouldn't matter who it was. I'd run into Mr. Calvi next door. They all knew that I had caused enough trouble, and that all of them were pouring in and nurturing their potential. That's so
correct.
important. It seems simple, right, but hard to do.
Yeah, so the village is not in place anymore as it used to be then, because some parents I don't know if they want their neighbors to discipline their child. But that's, as you said, everyone knew if you have walked out of line to help you stay on that path to make you become the best that you can be. And I think that's important, that we, create that village to support the young people because they do need the guidance, they do need the redirection, and we have to see it as a part of our responsibility to help them to navigate their journey to be their best. But as parents, we do have that responsibility to have good people in our circle that we can help share and that can help to mold the young people, because again they're going to be exposed, and having that reinforcement, I believe, is important. But I'm going to go to the next question. We ain't gonna. I know we're gonna get close to it, but I want to ask this question, and I think you kind of touched on it to some extent. How did your upbringing shape your mindset about success and the rules you were expected to follow?
My parents and my pastor, I would say, Jacob Blake, Reverend Jacob Blake, was my pastor. I would say the environment that I had growing up, if I look at my 14-year-old self, um, the question was right. How did it shape me? Is that really the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a sense, it was my parents gave me, and the pastors, and really the VFW, and really all my teachers and everybody. I mean, I got a little bit of runway on, I would say, misbehaving,
Okay.
right? And so I would misbehave, and then people would correct me. The village would come to me and correct me. But that's the same thing I use now, right? Is if I feel like I'm in a place where somebody's boxing me in, I have a network, and so I'm reaching out. Hey, I got this problem. His brothers, sisters, his whites, his blacks, his Hispanics, his Native Americans. I mean, I have an eclectic network that if I'm experiencing this problem, which leads me to the other thing that we have to undo is we all need help.
Yeah.
And we got to learn to be vulnerable, right? And expose ourselves. And to a certain extent, right, is to see ourselves that the system we're trying to create is bigger than us. So
Correct.
for me, right, is I'm an eco in the system. And so you're going to index boys and young men of color nationally on me. We're going to index it on we. We all have a collective responsibility. And when I'm in a place of trouble, I reach out and search for people who can give me clues on how to solve the problem. I don't try to solve it by myself.
Man, that is so important, and man, that is so important when it comes to us, because sometimes we do think we can do this thing by ourselves, and the more we move towards what we want to do, we realize that we can't do it, and it's important that once we come together with that mindset. It's not relying solely on one person to come up with the ideas. Just because I may think that Michael, he always come up with great ideas. I'm going to rest solely on you sharing the ideas, but it's important, that as you stated, that we come ready to support and be open to learn, because my perspective may not be the right perspective for that moment. So we also have to be willing to say, what, maybe I need to change mine, and remove the ego, and be willing to be vulnerable in that moment to say, what, my idea may not be the best idea. So um, and we all have those different experiences. But what I want to ask you is, what societal norms did you consciously decide to reject, and why?
I think the norms that I decided, and I still do, right, is you know it can be done, right? Which sometimes people tell you it can't be done. No, it
Yeah,
can. Um, I think I've tried to resist the cultural norm of the traditional pathway of work,
correct.
right? Is the last 15 years I've been in these roles and haven't been here, right? Because that's where the innovation comes from.
Correct.
Um, but I think that started with a foundation of a belief system of people who always thought I could do better than what I was doing. I think at 30, I read a book, and I can't remember now the exact title, but it was um, written by a guy named Jim Lair and Tony Schwartz. And here's the phrase that they said to me that transformed me at age 30. Is the life you are living worth more than you are giving up to have it? Is the life that you are living worth more than you are giving up to have it? I was like, whoa. And so whatever you're doing is don't give up life, right? I'm not going to give you everything in the job. It's got to be purpose.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give up things just to be, to assimilate, right? To me, my job is to acculturate into the system, because if one black man can do it, many of us can do it,
Correct. Correct.
right? And I don't believe I'm the only one. So to me, moving from assimilation to acculturation is how I push through the narratives, push through the lack of, push through the limiting labels. I mean, if you limit me, you just gave me permission to move, right? To push.
And
I ain't going nowhere if you limit me. I'm gonna stay
oh
right
yeah,
here to show you that it can be done.
and that's the mindset we need to develop. But again, some of us succumb to those limitations. We don't challenge ourselves because society told us not to. But not everyone have the same drive as you do. But that's the mindset that we need to have, especially if we really want to see change. Just tell me that I can't, and I'm going to prove you. I not even prove you wrong. I'm just going to prove myself right. And that's the mindset we have to have if we're going to see change. I'm just
No,
going to
let,
share.
let me give you, let me give you one other quick example that
Yeah,
I think for the audience out there. One of the things I developed in my early stage of my career that helped me push through, and this is I'm going to give you a quick technique. If you have a blank 3x5 card, on one side you put thank you, right? On the other side, you put themes. For 1 week, just listen to the things that people are thanking you for, right? That's the hash marks on the one side to say thank you. On the other side, write the words that they are thanking you for. And what that taught me is it's like the purchase, right? Thank you is like the purchase of your brand. And so it navigation skills, the ability to push through. People would say, man, you have the ability to push through. And that is what gave me the consistency and the reliability that I could do it. Like little techniques like that.
and that's a great reminder because people always seeing things that we're doing and they acknowledge it, but sometimes we see those small acknowledgement as just there, not really realizing the impact that it can have on us, and pay attention to where we're making the impact, and we can even double down in those spaces that which we are already making an impact. So I'm just going to shift gears a little bit to resilience and overcoming barriers. So this question is: how did you navigate moments of doubt or fear when making unconventional choices?
Use your network. Use other
use
people.
use
Yeah,
your net.
your network is your net worth. So if like how I would push through on resilience is I would call 6 or 7 people and then I would get advice. And if 5 out of 7 said something, then hey, that was it. And what I've learned is to utilize people in my life, to not try to push through resilience on my own. I have a beautiful wife who also will challenge me. Don't come through this door, and I'm complaining about something that she will take you down in a minute. But I think her support, my boy's support, and then my network is pushing through resilience, and then also knowing that if I feel like something is you said something really early. It's so important for us as males, particularly black males, to try to prioritize drive over ambition. I'm not saying ambition is the wrong word, but if you were
Yeah,
going to put them in order, drive is more important than ambition.
yeah, because with ambition without drive, you ain't going to really move from where you are, because
Yeah,
you may desire to want something, but if you don't have the drive or what it takes to go, because having ambition, suppose I want to achieve something great. If you don't have the drive to achieve something great, then you're not going to achieve it. You have the desire, the ambition, which ambition is like the fuel. The drive is what takes you to where you want to be. That's what I think.
yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I mean, I go back to you can dream, but don't neglect the execution, right?
That's right. That's
My,
right.
my, my favorite song in the world when I get into a dark place is Wu Tang's Triumph. Like I listen to Wu Tang's Triumph, right? And there's lots of lines in there, right? He's able to play my position in the game of life. stand firm, right? I just listen to, over. I listen to music. It's like, J. Cole. If I need J. Cole today, I might put on some Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
They're not like us, but it's
that's right.
but
You,
it's music is what contributes to my drive. It's music.
oh man, there are a lot of powerful lines in some of those music, and sometimes you'll be wondering, man, how did this guy think about that? And how profound it is, and even sometimes in that moment, as a reminder for you on the journey. Because they do have a lot of um, profound reminders in some of these, especially the artists that are more conscious of the impact that they can have on young people or their community. So I do, find some of these musics really empowering at times, and serve as great reminders as we navigate our journey.
Yeah, yeah. Kendrick Lamar's "TV Off" is to me like my favorite song. Right,
Mm.
TV Off, and one of the lines he has in there, right, is "Somebody got to do it."
Somebody got to do it,
Somebody got to do it. Well,
and
somebody
if
got
you,
to do
that's right. And if you find yourself in that position and even have the capacity, I think you should. We all have to play a role in the change that we want to see. It's not just seeing the change or complain about the change, but realize that we have a role to play in the change. So let me ask this question. I know we're already on the top of the hour. I may go a few minutes over, but um, what role did resilience play in your journey to success?
Well, first of all, iron sharpens iron, right? That's in Proverbs.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I'm not afraid to make mistakes. Um, and I'm not afraid to admit mistakes when I make mistakes. I hope, um, but you really can't get to the other side of change without resilience. And what I've learned is, right, you just gotta, like, if something's not right, you have to wait on it. Right? Don't just try to rush it, but you wait on it, right? Because over time, the contextual clues come. It's like going back to the story of Judas. I mean, Jesus had Judas at the table, man. The dude set him up,
Yeah,
but he loved on him anyway, right? But he wouldn't be able to get to the cross without Judas. And so, and people don't understand but he died at the cross. No, because that was the ultimate, right?
correct.
He gave his life so that we could. So people think of it as no, but he died. No, no, no. He lived. He lives actually because of that. So it's part of what I say to people in my own sense is it, I've heard this phrase a couple times. If it stays on your mind, it will happen over time. And
Yes.
to me, somebody asked me about 5, 6, 7 years ago, if there's one thing you can do on the why, what would you do? I said I would do Boys and Young Men of Color. And for some reason, 2 years later, it happened
Yeah,
because I
I
could see the problem. Yeah, I could see the problem. I was like, oh, I could see the problem. I could see in my own local Y, we were needing to prioritize boys out of Charlotte. I could see that boys were causing a lot of the conflict. And I could see that there was so much potential in the
mhm.
conflict. And so I just stayed with it.
Man, that is important. That would happen. I remember I wrote a like a job description as a solutionist, right? And I told him that I want to work in that community, like with kids that are at risk. And someone said, "Be careful of what you're saying, because you might just get it," which happened not too long afterwards. Which I started, So I do agree with you, and I can understand. Once you start to keep it in your mind, you're going to run into someone who can lead you to that opportunity. But let me ask the
Yeah,
final
T.D.
question.
Jake said this: at every level brings new devils.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And part of what we got to realize is resistance, challenge, um, and the ability to push through is the devil trying to take you off your path. And so every time I get resistance, I'm like, I know I'm on the right path.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
invite resistance. I invite resistance. I think until you get to a place where you have to question yourself on moving forward, you're not
Hmm.
really going to create change.
Oh no.
You know,
No.
you got to
Well.
learn to be in the toughest spots, in the darkest places. But you reach out and look for the life preservers of your friends and your network, and you ask them to tug on the rope. Pull me out for a minute, man.
That's right.
Let me breathe for a second, brother. Put me back in. But hold on to the rope, okay? Because I need a whole lot of life preservers on my journey down. But I think what we have to believe is the tension. I always say to people, why pull out when things are tense, right? Because you can't build a muscle. I always say to people, what does a muscle do when you need to build a muscle? What do? You lift weights, and what happens is you push through the limits, and that muscle tears, and then the muscle strengthens. Okay, why do we unplug when we get into the most tense moments? That's where the breakthrough is coming.
Man,
So you
that is
invite the
powerful.
tension,
Yeah,
invite
that
the
is,
tension, invite the challenging, invite, right, but come back with bridging the opportunity.
man, that is powerful. And I remember a story of the guy pushing the rock in the Bible. It's a biblical story. And all he was supposed to do was just to push the rock, but he thought at the moment he was supposed to move the rock. And not realizing that resistance and that force that he had to um, put towards the rock was even building him up. Not only his physical strength but also his inner strength. But if we stop in the moment, we don't get strong because we're not able to move what's in front of us. But sometimes all we need to do, as you mentioned, is to be present and keep going towards that which we know is the right thing to do. And in that moment, we get stronger. And but once we get stronger too, we're going to empower those who are seeing us, even without talking, just because we push through the challenge. But you said something that is really important. Once we're having that resistance, it's not that moment for us to quit. Is that moment, we need to keep pressing forward because that's where we're going to get the breakthrough. And I appreciate that reminder. But let me ask this question before we come to close today, because we definitely will have to continue this conversation in the future. But let's see how many questions we can get. Um, how did you handle criticism or skepticism from others, especially from within your own community? When you wanted to create change, when you want to make an impact, how did those people around you respond to you, especially outside of your own home and stuff like that, who may have that expectation of you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is data informs the human experience. So generally, if I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm going to look for one or two data points. And when I get resistance, it's the data point that I'm trying to change that keeps me moving. So I always ask people, like, okay, so you know the problem, right? Here's the problem. I'm going to tell you that over and over and over. And then if you can't combat that data point with another data point. So in our own strategy, let me tell you, there's a data point that says 80% of ninth graders who have a career in mind by ninth grade, 80% graduate from high school, right? So it makes sense intuitively, right? If 80% of our students who have a career in mind by ninth grade graduate from high school, because when you have a career in mind, that's purpose,
Hmm.
right? And so now school has a purpose.
Yeah.
If you don't have a career in mind, school ain't got no purpose. And so for our boys, we have to ask good questions, right? And so the way I would deal with, um, don't hate the player, right? Hate the game. So it's what I would always say is, what data point am I trying to solve the problem for? And then I stay with that data point. You can't tell me because I know the information.
So the data helps them to accept the change that you want to make, even if they haven't seen it for themselves yet.
Yeah, and then I just reveal it over and over and over again. So you telling me you know about this problem, 75% chronic absenteeism in that school, and what you want me to do is not acknowledge that problem. And then when I disaggregate, is mostly black boys, and you want me not to acknowledge it? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to acknowledge that problem. I'm going to keep reminding you you should see the problem the way I see it, not because I'm right, but because it is a data point. Right? The
Man,
data is neutral. Right? I'm not using it to my advantage because I don't win. Boys win.
correct. Man, that Man, that is so important. It's in the spaces that we want to create um, change. That is so important because once we become aware, we have to address what we are aware of if we're going to change that which we become aware of. So the change that's impacting the organization, that's impacting the low performance of black males once we are aware. And that's a great reminder. So I appreciate you remind us, everyone that's here listening. So let me ask this question. Can you share a specific moment when breaking the rules led to breakthrough for you?
Um, yeah, I can tell you when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, I worked there for a while. I mean, technically, it wasn't really breaking the rule, but um, we were having a terrible problem with juvenile crime in the summer, and we had a thing called Level Up where we opened up Y's from 8 to 11:30. And I remember police officers like, wanting to arrest the brother. I was like, but he did this. I was like, listen to me, man. We're not here to arrest people. Okay, we're gonna break that rule. And the reason we're gonna break that rule is because if he can come in here, even though he's broken a rule, he won't break that rule again. Okay, because we're gonna talk to him and now we know him and now we know his name. And technically the police officer let me break the rule, right? Because he had done something, not, I mean, it wasn't unsafe, but in the rule of policing,
Yeah,
he had broken the rule. I was like, no, 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 man. We're not here to arrest people. And I got to know the officers enough that they allowed me to break those rules, even though their protocol didn't allow them. And I think it's the same thing for others. We used to have cats coming in the Y with hats on. They would break rules all the time. I had to tell my staff, we don't kick them out. I go to the brother, hey, give me the hat, man. Okay, when you leave, take the hat, come into my office, knock on the door, and you can go out. But you can't walk in here. We got some rules. Okay, you're trying to break the rules. Don't come in the back door.
yeah,
Okay, won't come through the fire alarm. No, brother, come to my office. Stop breaking rules. And people would tell me, but the policy says you got to kick them out. We're not kicking them out because they need to be here. If they're causing challenges, they need to be here. And so I would break all those rules in the organization, that the policies set up. And then at one point in time, we changed the rules that,
oh,
you'd have to have a small posse of two or three folks in a system before you expanded, or kicked someone out of, expelled them out of an out of the branch. You need
mhm.
three leaders. You can't do it by yourself. We just changed the rule.
Man, and that's important. And sometimes, some of the young people that act up or try to break the rules, trying to not just get the attention, but to see if they're in an environment that someone care about them. Because they once show them that you care, and then they will start to, apply what you're saying, more than just kicking them out, but just to get them to understand why they're there. That will help them to know that you care, because some young people haven't been around people that really care about who they are as people. They see them as problem, and if they believe that you constantly see us as problem, I may just keep acting as the problem that you see us as. And I think sometimes, as you mentioned, that's important.
Yeah, I ran dances, Richard, and I know we're running late. I ran dances when I was, a youth director. I was middle school and high school. And here's a rule I used to break. These are, they are no longer kids. They're like 45 and 50 now. But
Yeah,
kids used to show up at the Y at night for these parties, right? Drinking in the parking lot, and they come into the Y party drunk,
yeah,
basically. Now you know what I would do? I would take their keys. I would have two volunteers, take the person home, drive the car home, put the keys in the mailbox. I would tell the kids, now listen to me, okay? I'm breaking a rule, but let me tell you what's going to happen. If you don't tell your parents tomorrow morning that you were here, I will.
yeah,
And I would force him to, right? It's like people would be like, you took him home? Yeah, we'd be arrested for stuff like that now. But it was my way of breaking the rule in a way, right? Taking them home, but I would let the volunteers keep the alcohol. But it was like, you keep the alcohol, because they're not supposed to be drinking that alcohol. Okay,
Yeah.
but take them home, right, and have them be safe. But make sure they're accountable to their parent,
Correct. Yeah.
right? Leave the keys in the mailbox. The last thing I would tell people that's unconventional, and I just want to say this. This didn't answer your question. This is a whole nother question. But the other is the conventional rule that I would try to break is to find myself in the organization, not to lose it. Right. So I never assimilated in the organization. I tried to find myself in the organization, and that's where purpose and these innovative jobs came up. Is because
Mhm.
I was like, oh no, 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 I that job don't even exist. It's like the solutions finder, man. Like that job
Yeah.
don't exist. I'm gonna create my own job because you need solutions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what's needed today. I've gone into several meetings and everybody can point out the problem. There is no short list of what's wrong, but not everyone's coming up with a solution to those problems. But before we go today, I just where can the listeners? I have one more question that I'm going to ask before after this question. But where can the listeners find you and support you in what you're doing? Because I also believe that you have a lot that you can share, not just to this audience, but to those who are in spaces similar to yours and may need best ways or best practices in serving. So where can they find you and support you with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, for those investors that can help us with reach, resources, and impact, I would say go to ymcadc.org /BYMOC, or you can go on the national website. Um, because part of how we know each other, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So ain't no better place to find me. You and I are having conversations all the time on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say, michael.devaul at ymca.net. You can find me there too. But it's, I don't hide. I'm on many of the social media platforms. So, and I'm not too proud to meet with anybody
Correct.
on impact. But our call to action is I'm about serving boys, young men of color.
Correct. Man, that's great. That's great. And I will. It will be in somewhere in the description, for them to reach out to you. So my final question before we wrap up today: how can we, as a collective, continue to create spaces where more Black men feel empowered to break barriers?
Trust but verify, right? Um, get involved. Stop complaining about the problem. If you said it 3 times, stop talking about it. Do it. Right? There's no don't complain 3 times. Um, my fraternity has a great saying too, and I would say to broadly, this is to all: 8 men thoroughly immersed in the true Omega spirit are far greater assets than 80 with lukewarm enthusiasm. So
Hmm.
I say, look for the eight,
That's right.
not
That's
the
right.
80. Not the 80. Look for the eight. Right. And so you will find 8 disciples who want to do exactly what you're doing. But just remember that there are also 72 who gonna fake on
Man, I know. I know that.
you. Trust but verify, right? So I look for the eight, who can I mobilize with, but I can see the 72. I'm not gonna keep loving on them. But you ain't really down with me on trying to change this. So I'm cool. You ain't gotta come
Correct.
with me. But I'm going with the people who wanna make change, who wanna create change.
Man,
Like you.
that's right. That's right, man. I'm all about change. I tell you,
Yeah.
the situation that I born into and the opportunities that I've gained over the years, I wouldn't want to do anything else than to be of service, to make an impact and to create opportunities for others. Because that's what drives me. Because I didn't have to be in this position. Along my journey, there were so many people who have helped me to be in spaces to get to where, and someone opened one door, and when I was in that door someone opened another door. So right now I have to be of service. And one of my mentors, Dr. Kimbrough, said to me, service is what we do. For service is the rent we pay for our time on earth. So whilst we're here we should be of service.
That's right.
Man,
We'll leave it right there, man. We're gonna leave that
that's
word
right.
right there.
That's right. uh,
Hey, thank
MD.
you, sir. I appreciate you.
Man, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here. And for the listeners, again, my name is Dr. Richard A. Cross, the founder of the Black Male Impact. And the Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired. Thanks for those who are here with us and have been here with us. Man, it's a great conversation. And Mr. DeVaul, it's a pleasure. And looking forward to having another conversation sometime in the near future.
Yeah. Likewise, thank you very much, Richard.
It's a pleasure.